Hi, Varda.
Okay, so I cannot record on the YouTube because it requires an authorization that is sent to a telephone I don't have, someone else's phone. So the recording will be on Zoom for the moment, and then I hope maybe someone at the Dharma Friends will be able to transfer it to YouTube. But at least it should be then recorded on Zoom. Okay.
Bye, Jimmy.
So of course, I just remind all of us that we can give, dana. So for the classes, for our teachers, for the Dharma Friends of Israel. I guess you all know the address. You'll find it on the internet. I couldn't find it in English, so pasting it in Hebrew is maybe not as efficient. So okay, and I hope you enjoy the class. As I said, I will have to leave in a few minutes. You are on mute, Geshe.
Okay, great. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Is Dalit here today?
No,
I don't see her.
There's a slight problem, Dalit. There's a electricity blackout in her region, so she cannot join. So I'm taking her place, but only for a few minutes because I have to leave. So
I
So
understand.
I will make you a call. Is that okay with you?
I have a slight problem because I prepared this handout that I want to display on the screen, but for some reason I can't send it to my own computer. I have some trouble with my laptop. So could I send it to you? But then I need someone who displays it for some time on the screen. I don't know whether that's going to work.
You can send it to me, no problem.
Orit. So then Orit could take over and okay, that'd be great. Orit, can you give me your email?
I can
address?
put it on the chat.
Please do. Yeah. I'm sorry for that delay, but I prepared it and might as well, because I thought it was a really important point about self-centeredness. Oh, here we go. Just a sec. Orit Mizika, is that right?
Yeah.
Okay. Orit Mizika. Great. Just a sec. Uh-oh. I'm having some problems with all my emails suddenly. I don't know, maybe someone hacked into my emails. Oh,
Well, if you want, you can put it on the chat if it's not that big, and then I can download it and
no, I can't do that because I need to transfer it from my iPad to your account. And somehow, I don't know why I cannot. Okay, I'll try something else. Just one sec. I think someone hacked into my, okay. All right, I'll try it again. I'll forward it to you.
but Jimmy, can you put me also co-host so that I could share the screen?
Okay, so
Let me see.
so I can put you co-host, but first of all, I think it would be better if Gisela is the host and then she puts you co-host because I have to
Oh.
leave you in a few minutes.
Okay.
Okay? Thank you.
Okay, I don't know how to do that, but I'll try. Okay. All right. Anyway, I'll send it to you just now. And then let's see what happens. Okay. Okay.
Okay, I got something.
You got something? It says answer to Jimmy's question.
Okay.
Okay. But let's start with a short meditation.
Gisela,
Yes, please.
I need to make
You
you
need to leave.
host.
Okay.
Okay, I need to leave
Yep.
and make you host. So let me please
Of
just
course.
find out how to do it.
Okay.
Background participants. Okay, participants are here. Kelsang Wangmo. Make host. All right. Yes, here you are. All right. So you should be the host now.
Sharing your screen will close the whiteboard for everyone. Okay, here we go. Great. Okay. Yes. Okay, great. And now I can.
Oh, sorry.
Okay, I can get Orit to become a host as well, right? To share the screen as well.
Mm-hmm.
How do I do this?
Oh, you just share the screen the usual way, I guess.
I've never done this before. It was always Dalit who did this. Can
I
you
think
show
if you go to
Yeah.
Orit's picture, and then there are
Okay.
like 3 little dots on Orit's picture, and if you hover over those dots, it'll say make her co-host.
Okay, great. Let me just find. I just kind of lost everything here.
Yeah.
What
If
did
you
I
stop
do?
sharing, it'll be easier.
Okay, I kind of lost the Zoom thing. Oh, here it is. Okay. All right. So I'll you said I should press on Orit's.
Yeah, if you
Up
take
here.
your cursor to her picture, there'll be 3 little dots on the right side of her face.
I found it. Make host.
Make co-host.
Oh, make co-host. Okay. Make co-host. Oh, great. There it is. Perfect. Make co-host. Yes. So Orit, now you're co-host.
Okay,
We'll see if I can.
Great. Thank you very much. Eric, I think his name is.
Edouard.
Edward, sorry. Thank you for helping out.
One last thing, please, is
Yes,
at the end of the meeting, since you are the host,
yes.
please just press the end meeting button.
End meeting button. Okay.
Yes, I think it's once and then second time. Okay, it's maybe
Okay.
twice pressing. Okay.
All right. Okay, great. Thank you. I hope I'll find it. Thank you very much.
I listen to it later on. Thank you.
Sure, of course. Thank you.
Bye.
Okay. Sorry for all that technical trouble. What happened? Okay. All right. Just a sec. Somehow I don't find the prayer. Okay, do you have the prayer?
I have something else, but it should be okay.
Somehow I think someone may have hacked into my device because I don't find certain things right now, which I used to find. Again.
This will be okay.
Yes, I think it's okay. I'll just look for it one more time. No, it's gone. This is so bizarre. Yeah, I can't find it.
We already know it by heart, so we can just recite it.
I don't know the English prayer by heart, so.
We do.
You do. Okay, so please, whoever wants to do it in English can do so. Okay, so let's take a moment we'll do a short version today to generate the aspiration to become fully enlightened, not just for our own benefit, but for the benefit of all sentient beings. And it's also with this aspiration, with this mind, that we study the 7-point mind training. And so whoever said that they know the prayer, please recite it.
I go
in
for
English.
refuge until I'm enlightened to the Buddha, the Dharma, the Supreme Assembly. By my practice of giving and other perfections, may I become a Buddha to benefit all sentient beings. I go for refuge until I'm enlightened to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. By my practice of giving and other perfections, may I become a Buddha to benefit all sentient beings. Sangye chodang choki chonam
저기 존남 라 전주 바도
Dakshi Japsu Chi Dakshi Jinso Pepe Sonam Sola Penshi Sanketupa Shom.
Okay. Thank you, Vada. That was nice. Okay, great. Yes, please, Orit, if you can. Oops, it's gone. What just happened? Hello? Is anyone there?
You want me to put the prayer again?
Yes. No. Let's start with, if you could just display the, what's it
The
called?
Buddha picture?
No.
No.
Today, I just did a brief kind of generation of the motivation. So let's start class now. So if you could display what I just sent you.
No, it's not this one.
I think you need to click on this blue thing here, and then it takes you to your computer.
It's here, Jimmy's question.
Ah, there it is. Great. Okay. Oh, there it is. Very good. Thank you, Orit. All right. I thought it was really important, and last time I got confused and I don't think I gave a clear answer, so I want to do this today. Now, I believe Jimmy's question, and I may have interpreted a little bit into it, but it doesn't really matter. So his question was, does the Bodhisattva have dependently arisen centeredness instead of self-centeredness? Because the self refers to inherent existence, and the Bodhisattva has realized emptiness, and thus that all phenomena are dependently arisen. Okay, so dependently arisen cherishing. If we use the literal Tibetan term, cherishing, so cherishing oneself. If the self refers to inherent existence and the Bodhisattva has realized the lack of inherent existence, wouldn't it become dependently arisen centeredness or dependently arisen cherishing? Okay, now the two answers to that, or two parts of the answer has two parts. As explained below, and I'll explain in a moment, it's described below. The self of self-centeredness or self-cherishing, and here I put the self in bold letters because, well, just to show when we say self-centeredness, what is the self we're talking about here? Well, it does not, that self does not refer to inherent existence, but to the conventionally existent self. And we'll see why that is the case. So it's not inherent existence we're talking about here, but the conventional self. The second part of this answer is if hypothetically, even if hypothetically, the self of self-centeredness were to refer to inherent existence. So here, as Jimmy suggested, the self here refers to inherent existence, then ordinary beings who have not realized emptiness will also have dependently arisen centeredness or cherishing, because centeredness or cherishing exists, and whatever exists necessarily lacks inherent existence and is therefore dependently arisen. So it would always be dependently arisen cherishing or dependently arisen centeredness, because centeredness or cherishing, centeredness is not really, I don't think it's a word that stands on its own or makes much sense in this context, but cherishing exists and it must therefore be dependently arisen cherishing. But the first part I'm mainly interested in. So what is the self of self-centeredness, of self-cherishing? And how is the term used? Now, I don't know whether you find this terribly interesting, but I think as part of studying Buddhist philosophy, it's important to understand that some terms are used in slightly different ways in different contexts. And some words are used more than other words. Some words are only used in certain contexts and in no other context. But the word self is used in at least 3 different ways. Okay, so therefore it says here, regarding the first part of this answer, there are basically 3 ways in which the term self is used in the Buddhist scriptures. So if you can scroll down or read to the next bit. So here we go. So 3 ways. It refers to the conventionally existent self or I. It also can refer to a non-existent I or self that is wrongly perceived on the basis of the conventional self. That'll be explained in a moment. So a non-existent I or self that is just wrongly perceived on the basis of the conventional self and inherent existence. Okay. So 3 different meanings. I basically mentioned them last time, but I'll briefly go through them again. First, you have the conventionally existent self, the I or the self that is merely labeled on the basis of any of the 5 aggregates. So myself, yourself, and so forth. That's pretty easy. Okay, then a non-existent I or self that is wrongly perceived on the basis of the conventional self. So the basis is the self that exists, but on that basis, we then misperceive the I, misperceive the self. So for instance, a permanent, partless, independent self, self-sufficient, substantially existent self, an inherently existent self, a self that is more important than others. Okay, so when we when we look at ourselves, when we analyze ourselves, we may have all sorts of wrong views when it comes to this actually conventionally existent self. So on that basis, we then come up with all sorts of unrealistic selves. That's also called self. a non-existent self, but still described as self. And then you have inherent existence. So in the case of the selflessness of person, for instance, here again, when we say selflessness of person, what does that self refer to? Or the selflessness of phenomena other than person. Here, that self refers to inherent existence. So it is used in that way, definitely. In certain contexts, it's used in this way. So this is because the selflessness of person, the emptiness of person, and the lack of inherent existence of person are equivalent. So here it's obvious just from the way the terminology is used, since they're used interchangeably, selflessness of person, the emptiness of person, and so forth, it becomes clear that in this context, talking of selflessness of person, for instance, the self means inherent existence. So, of course, you may think, why make it so complicated? I mean, why not just use different terms and not? But I can't tell you exactly the reason, but the benefit, of course, is that we have to pay extra attention. And there may be certain reasons. Anyway, I don't want to go into them. That's just my opinion, and there's no point. It would take too long. But it definitely keeps us on our toes, keeps us attentive. So if for no other benefit, it's got that benefit. All right. Now, having said this, let's go back to self-cherishing. And I did a little bit of research on this, did some reading on this, and it's really interesting to, well, it's important also to focus more on what self-cherishing actually means, and in particular, what is that self? First of all, according to some scholars, and here I don't use the word self-centeredness, but I use the word self-cherishing, which is literally the Tibetan term. Rang Jensin. Jebar Zimba means cherishing. Rang means oneself or self. So self-cherishing, that is a correct consciousness. So the self-cherishing, actually, that is a correct consciousness because the I is precious and needs to be cherished. So this is very much in favor for self-confidence, having self-confidence, understanding how precious we are, but not in an exaggerated way, but in a realistic way. And then self-cherishing, of course, that is a wrong consciousness, that is an extreme mind, because it cherishes the I more than others, thinks that oneself is more important than others. Okay, so that's clear. Now here, we're only looking at the second type. The second type of self-cherishing can also be referred to as self-centeredness. Okay, so here we can use this term. In Tibetan, there's not really an equivalent. They use the word self-cherishing in both cases. But in English, we have self-centeredness, so I might as well use this. That's obviously just from the connotation of the word. The second type, the wrong consciousness. Of the two types, we must have the first type, considering oneself as precious, and overcome the second type. The self of both types of self-cherishing is the conventional self. The self of both types is the conventional self. All right. Self-cherishing, that is a correct consciousness, is not only based on the conventional self, and I'll say a little bit more about this, it also perceives the conventional self, and the conventional self appears to this mind. So when we have this healthy sense of I'm important, I'm precious, just as everyone else, basically. So I'm important. This based on that healthy sense of self-confidence, then the self, the conventional self, appears to the mind, is perceived by the mind. Therefore, the self of self-cherishing, that is a correct consciousness, is the conventional self. Well, it's pretty obvious. So it's really just dealing with the conventional self. But then the self of the self-cherishing, of self-centeredness, in other words, so that is a wrong consciousness, is also the conventional self. And here it becomes complicated, because although this mind does not perceive the conventional self, nor does the conventional self appear to it, its perception of inherent existence is based on the conventional self. This is an important point in philosophy and a little confusing. It's like, why does that mind, why is the self of self-cherishing the existent self when it doesn't appear to that mind, and the mind doesn't perceive that self-cherishing, that wrong consciousness. It doesn't appear to that wrong consciousness. Why would you say that that self is the conventionally existent I? Well, because it is based on it. It is because there's a conventional I that on that basis, we then generate an extreme view of that self and cherish it. This is similar to self-grasping, it goes on to say, because the self of self-grasping, the word denzin in Tibetan, or self-grasping, is also, the self here is also the conventional self. Self-grasping is a mind that perceives the conventional self as inherently existent. So it's this root misperception when it comes to the self, when it comes to the I, our root ignorance in relation to the self. Although self-grasping does not perceive the conventional self, nor does the conventional self appear to this mind, its perception of inherent existence is based on the conventional self. It's the conventional self that is perceived to be inherently existent, which is why the self of self-grasping refers to the conventional self. So just because it's based on that, we then have all sorts of wrong views. It is important to understand that although self-cherishing, that is a wrong consciousness, going back to the self-centeredness, does not perceive the conventional self, nor does the conventional self appear to this mind, it perceives a non-existent I or self that is wrongly perceived on the basis of the conventional self. Okay, so I mentioned that last time, that what is self-centeredness really? Let's kind of think back of our own self-centeredness, the way we perceive of the self as more precious than others, or our own happiness as more important than the happiness of others. That's really what self-centeredness is. That's definitely a wrong consciousness, because neither am I more important than others, nor is my happiness more important than that of others. So it's clear that that which it perceives doesn't exist. Me being more important, my happiness being more important. Moreover, it cherishes the self, but it's the conventional self cannot appear to that mind. It is not that the mind perceives the conventional I and then exaggerate its importance. That's impossible. It's merely based on that. It focuses on that, but it doesn't become an object of that mind. Because to have that extreme view that, for instance, my happiness is more important than the happiness of others, the self that I perceived must be an exaggerated self. The second type that I mentioned earlier, a non-existent self that is wrongly perceived on the basis of that conventional self. So an inherently existent self, a self-sufficient self, a permanent self, or simply a self that is more important than others. And there are different possibilities. It doesn't have to be the inherently existent self. It doesn't have to be a self that is more important. But in one way or another, when our self-cherishing arises, it does perceive a self. It perceives a self, but that self can never be an existent self. It's always a self that we ascribe a characteristic that it can't have. So permanent self or inherent self, or self that is more important than others. Self-centeredness perceives such a self by, for example, perceiving the happiness of that non-existent self as more important than the happiness of others. Okay, so to just say it again, what is so confusing is that self-centeredness, the self of self-centeredness, although it's the conventional self, that conventional self is merely the basis. The self that it does perceive is a non-existent one, and that non-existent self is then cherished. Why is this important? Well, because that is also true for other afflictions, such as anger. When I'm angry with another person, the basis for that anger is the conventional other person. It's the basis. But the other person that my anger perceives is not an existent person. Because if it were a conventional person that my anger perceive, it could never be angry. Okay? So when we're angry with another person and we perceive that anger perceives the other person, it is either an inherently existent person or a person who is one with a negative quality that we dislike or we're angry with. Whichever wrong kind of other person we perceive or unrealistic other person we perceive, on the basis of that, we see their negativity blown up and we just want to be away from them. We're angry with them, basically. Taking attachment. When we're attached to another person, again, our attachment perceives a self that is non-existent, perceives a person that the way it is perceived by that mind cannot possibly exist. And then it gets attached to it, right? It exaggerates the positive qualities of that person and it gets attached to it. So attachment, as another example, attachment to another person, it is based on the conventional person. Well, it can also be based, of course, on some fantasy. That's also possible. Actually, it's also possible. Attachment, when you're in a dream, you have a dream of a person who doesn't exist, or anger in that case. All right. So in that case, it works that way. It's okay to say that it's not based on something conventionally existent, but that's different to the self-centeredness, because the mind that is self-centered bases it on the person who is labeled on the basis of that self-cherishing. So it's different. Does that make sense? So with self-centeredness, the basis is always a conventionally existent I, whereas in the case of anger with another person, that could be an actual person, and therefore then it would be based on a conventional person. Or in the case of attachment, it could be a non-real, it could be a real person that it's based on. So it's based on a conventional person, but it could also be an imagined person, a dreamed up person. And then that the person which it is based on doesn't exist, and the person that is perceived doesn't exist anyway. Okay, is it too confusing? So anger and attachment for another person. The person that these two afflictions perceive never exist, but they can be based on an existent person or a non-existent person. Okay, existent person, I guess, are most cases of attachment and anger. Some guy, John or whoever, we get angry with them or we attach to them. In the case of the basis on the basis of which anger and attachment arise, if the person doesn't exist, it could be a person we dreamed up, we have a dream about, that doesn't actually exist. Someone who's online pretending to be a beautiful girl, but in actuality, there is no beautiful girl and they're attached to this beautiful girl. I mean, someone is chatting with them. Yeah, anyway, so these are examples of when the attachment is not based on a realistic person. Okay. All right, so I can see some questions. Sneh, go ahead. I think you were first.
Thank you, Geshe-ma. I just wanted to clarify, where you said if that anger needs a basis that is misunderstood of the person. So I don't know how to phrase it, but let's say I even have some understanding that the person is dependently arising and so forth, but they're still saying mean things to me and they're still hurting me. Why would I not then also be angry with them? Even though I can conceptually at least understand that that they are not inherently existent, that they're also shaped by causes and conditions and so forth. But that person is still being mean to me.
Okay. Why can you not be angry? Why can your anger not be angry with a conventionally existent person, right? Okay.
Yeah.
Now, it seems that that is the case because you think, well, on one hand, I do understand that they lack inherent existence. I believe this. I mean, understand there are different levels. I believe that. I'm convinced they're dependently risen. But we shouldn't forget that the mind that knows, that understands, or is convinced that this other person, let's call this other person John. So John lacks inherent existence. The mind that knows that or believes that is not the same mind that gets angry with John. That's very important. We can't really differentiate between the two. We're usually so involved. So we have a moment of thinking, yeah, well, John is dependently arisen, but he sucks, right? So when we say, okay, yeah, anyway, when we have this thought, oh, John lacks inherent existence, in that moment we're not angry. In that moment we're not angry. We just have a sense, I'll give you a realistic thought about John. But then a moment later, I'm remembering what John has done to me, how he's abused me, etc. And this mind turns into anger. And in this moment, John no longer appears as a realistic person. This is an extremely important mind. It's really extremely important point. Our mind is so fast. And I want to stress this because as part of our practice of mindfulness and introspection, we need to be aware of the fact that our mind changes very quickly from correct mind, affliction, incorrect mind, therefore, incorrect mind back. So it goes back and forth and back and forth. These are different minds. And when there's anger, its object never exists. Nothing that exists can appear to it, which includes the person that we're angry with. There's always an exaggerated version of that person. This we need to recognize. This is why the afflictions have no basis in reality, because nothing whatsoever that appears to them or that they actively perceive exists. A moment earlier, fine, but that moment earlier is what it is. A moment, I mean, it's not the same mind. It's a different type of mind. It existed a moment earlier. Now I'm angry with John, and that John no longer exists. Really important to realize that. Then we don't follow from our anger. We cannot trust our anger. But we need to distinguish between the correct mind. Okay, he's insulted me. He's done such and such and such. Okay, I can think of that. I can analyze that. It's the anger I need to be aware of, which then guides my action, which are extreme, which are unrealistic, because the mind that made me do these things is unrealistic, is not based in reality. So important to understand this. Okay, Sneem, does that make sense?
Yeah. Thank you, Geshe-ma, because I think at least what I take away now is that, you know, when I do feel anger or irritation or attachment, in a way, it's telling me I have a wrong mind. Like that mind is not to be relied upon. I don't know why it's, you know, I may not fully understand how it's wrong, but it's wrong because it's generating affliction. So therefore it cannot be arising on any correct basis. And I have to be careful how I respond. But in those moments where I actually can feel like, oh, you know, this person has been shaped by all these different forces and they are the way they are, that's a different mind.
Different mind. Cannot be angry.
Yeah. Okay.
In that moment, you can't be. Yes. Okay.
Thank you.
Sure, welcome. Shmuel, please go.
Yeah, hello, Geshe-ma. I just wanted to ask if I can ask Corit to share this file with me by email.
Oh, yes, please. Of course. Yeah, absolutely. I only finished just shortly before class, so I didn't have the chance to send it off, but you can all have it. I want to make it available to everyone. Yes, absolutely. Orit, could you just go down to the end of this file? There's one last sentence I want to mention.
What I wanted to say is that if we take pride, maybe it's better affliction than to take attachment and anger. You can say the self-confidence is the conventionally existent self, and the non-existence is the feeling of pride. And usually it's very difficult to differentiate between them.
That's true. What is the difference between self-confidence and arrogance? Right? I mean, even pride in Tibetan, sometimes the word pride is used in a positive way. Oh, I'm proud of my accomplishment. I rejoice in my own accomplishment, feeling proud of myself. I think there's a version that's healthy. It's kind of a rejoicing in my own good qualities or my own success, for instance.
Yeah,
that is
but
realistic.
It's not just that. It's feeling being above someone else, better than someone else.
That would then be the wrong type of pride, the extreme pride. We could maybe give it a different term, call it arrogance, haughtiness or something, which just to differentiate the two. So when we say, I'm proud of you, right? Our parents are proud of us. It can be exaggerated. Oh, my child is better than everyone else. Or it's like, I'm proud of you because you did well. I'm just happy about it without exaggerating the person that is perceived, right? Without perceiving them in an extreme way. Okay. So very important. I agree. This is so difficult. I mean, everything about Buddhist practice is about balancing. Having a healthy sense of self-confidence, and not falling into the extreme of I'm better than everyone else. That's why it's so important to recognize these minds, get to know them better, learn about them, and then apply that which we've learned to our own experience. Okay, just now I felt like I had this moment. Was I proud? Was it a realistic proud? Was it just rejoicing in a calm fashion? Or was I really like overexcited about myself? And actually already from the calmness of my mind in that moment, right? Oh, okay. Pretty chilled. And oh, that was okay. Good. What's next? Oh, this other person did really well as well. That seems like a realistic mind. Whereas if suddenly I go like, did everyone see me? Does everyone know this? Right? So right away, when there's this weird excitement that's not a peaceful type, we're no longer chilled out. Now, if someone were to threaten that sense, so it's so much part of our Buddhist practice. Really, Buddhist practice is all about, of course, reducing and overcoming afflictions. But how can we reduce something if we cannot differentiate it from all the other minds that we want to develop, that we need to develop? And that's why learning about the inflictions is so important. And of course, just learning about them. Oh, my neighbor's anger, learning about that. That's not the point. My own, right? My own anger. How does it work? To sit with it and watch it, even if just going back in time. Okay, so that's why I said this. I really liked the question. I mean, it took me a while to understand. But then I realized, yes, it's confusing with the self being used in different ways, how to apply it in that situation. And so it gave me the opportunity to talk about it in more detail, to say that, well, when we talk about the self-cherishing mind, the self-cherishing mind refers to the conventional self, the way I've explained it. But then included in that, of course, is the explanation that the self that is perceived by that mind is an unrealistic self. Okay, and then I talked about the last paragraph. I talked about also last time. So just to repeat that again, the above explanation. So everything I said so far was based on the self-cherishing mind. So we talk about self-cherishing from the point of view of the mind itself. So now let's talk about a self-cherishing person, such as self-cherishing John. Okay, this is based on the confusion I got into last time, and Orit helped me with that. Based on John's self-cherishing mind, we say, or we label, that John cherishes himself. Okay, so we say, of course, John's self-cherishing mind cherishes the person. So John's self-cherishing mind cherishes John, but also we say John himself cherishes himself. In this case, what is cherishing is not the self-cherishing mind, but John or his self. Okay, in this case, when we talk about John here, of course, it's based on his self-cherishing mind, but that's different. Here, what is self-cherishing is John. The self of John that cherishes itself also refers to the conventional self, because a non-existent self cannot cherish itself, right? That was the point I made, yes, last time. Okay, that was all. And it was just really a summary of what I went through last time. But I thought writing it down and giving it to you, maybe it's less confusing. Okay, great. Now let's go back. And now I need to, I think I can share the text now myself.
I put the file on the chat, so anyone who wants to download it can do it.
Great, thank you. Thank you for that, Orit. Okay, what is happening here? Go away. Okay, 7-point mind training. I didn't go through the Lamrim this time. I also need to make a brief announcement before, and I'm sorry, I'm just saying it because otherwise I'll forget towards the end. I'm extremely busy right now because His Holiness is giving a lot of teachings. There's a Jenang coming up. I have to translate it, the Jenang ritual, into English and then into German. That takes me a while. Afterwards, I have to translate the entire Key to the Middle Way, the book that His Holiness will teach in June. So I'm really, really busy. The moment I got back here, or a few days after, I heard about all these teachings. So if I now start, as it was planned, on May 13th, it'll be very hard for me to finish the work I have to do in time, finish in time. Plus, I won't have enough time to prepare for class, and it'd be all very stressful.
Yeah,
so then
I doubt the 13 will work because it's Memorial Day and Independence Day. I already told Dalit, but I guess she...
Okay, but the news that I have to give you is a little bit, it's on the 17th of June that I can only start. And I tell you why, because I'm teaching a course at Bodhicitta on the True Truth, which starts on the 4th. His Holiness's teachings on this book, Key to the Middle Way, which is a beautiful book. The translation is a little bit older, so it's harder to read, but it's a beautiful book. It'll be on the 3rd and the 4th of June. So until then, I'll be extremely busy. And then there's this course. I'll be tired. I'm teaching the whole day. And I thought it's better to be fresh and not overworked when starting this class. So I would like to start on June 17th. My apologies for that delay. But right now, yeah, there's just a lot going on. And it's extremely important for me to prepare all the texts for His Holiness's teachings in the best way possible, because His Holiness doesn't teach in the same way as he used to in the past. And so it's important for people to have the material in the best possible way. And then even if it's not, His Holiness doesn't teach with the same details, there's still great importance to His Holiness. I mean, His Holiness, people still get a lot out of the teachings. And of course, His Holiness lives a long life because there are many people listening to his teachings. I mean, that's, yeah. Anyway, so having said all this, June 17th, we'll start on that day. There won't be any delay. It'll definitely be that day. I'll be well prepared and I won't have so much else to do. Okay, great. Having said that, let's now go back to the text, the 7-point mind training. We got to do not depend on other conditions, engage in the principal practices now. That's, I think, where we got to, right? So what does it mean? Of course, here the principal practices, what does that really refer to? So in some commentaries, it talks about what is most important is the Dharma. Of course, this is from a Buddhist point of view, and you may disagree, but really from a Dharmic point of view, worldly affairs, yeah, they're important worldly affairs as well, but even more important than these worldly affairs is the Dharma practice or Dharma. And then when you take the Dharma, more important than studying and reflecting on the Dharma or studying and teaching the Dharma is practice, obviously. So that's really most important. And most important practice is the practice of bodhicitta. Most important practice of bodhicitta and emptiness, definitely those two. Something His Holiness talks a lot about these days when he teaches, always bodhicitta and emptiness, most important. And more important than training just through the scriptures, through debate and so forth, is to practice what our Lama teaches. Okay, so a person living the Dharma. I think it'll be safe to say that someone like His Holiness the Dalai Lama, Kyabje Jadu Rinpoche, the late Lama Zopa Rinpoche. I mean, those are incredible beings, incredible spiritual masters who live the Dharma. And we get a very different sense of the Dharma if we follow their instructions. If we listen to their instructions, they affect us very differently than if we just read something by some person who hasn't got the same realization, someone like me just speaking empty words. It's a very different effect on us. So very important to follow the instructions of a realized master. And of course, more important than any other activity really when it comes to the Dharma is to practice it. So in that way, what are the principal practices? Again, really Dharma practice, bodhicitta, emptiness, based on the instruction by a realized being. That is most important. Then the next point is number 15, do not apply misplaced understanding. Here we talk about certain qualities. Misplaced understanding here, there are 6 qualities that are mentioned in the commentaries, which is forbearance, which is enjoyment, because enjoyment is important. Joy in something, enjoying something, compassion, or having passion for something, striving and rejoicing. So these are mentioned in the commentaries, but sometimes we apply them in the wrong way. So forbearance or enduring something, enduring hardships. If, for instance, instead of enduring any difficulty associated with the Dharma, we endure worldly difficulties that are associated with the object of our desire, this is misguided forbearance. So sometimes we can be so patient when it comes to getting some worldly object, getting the object of our desire. We're so patient to get that. But the moment we start meditating and there's some noise or an itch, we can't bear it. Sounds familiar? So again, important to avoid this misunderstanding that kind of forbearance with worldly issues, that is worthwhile, whereas forbearance or patience when it comes to Dharma practice is not. Should be the opposite way. Also, when it comes to enjoyment, if we feel that enjoyment refers to, I don't know, the taste of sensual desires, basically, so sensual objects, beautiful sights, sounds, and so forth, those are real enjoyments. And instead of that, so instead of enjoying our Dharma experience, we can only enjoy sensual objects. Well, that's again a misplaced understanding as to what it means to enjoy something. I mean, it doesn't mean don't enjoy good food and so forth, but the emphasis should be more on enjoying mind training, enjoying to get to know our own mind, our own afflictions and so forth. We need to find joy in that. Okay. And then also when it comes to compassion, if instead of having compassion for those who engage in negativities, we have compassion for those who practice the Dharma. Oh, the poor guy, he sits in this empty room and is just meditating all day. How boring, that poor person, right? Totally misled, misplaced compassion. Again, we need to look out. We feel like, oh, these are positive states of mind. Ooh, I've got so much compassion for this poor monk or nun who are meditating their whole life. Well, we should have compassion with those who really waste their life with all the, wasting all their positive karma by just enjoying frivolous kind of activities. Passion, again, to devote ourselves to the Dharma, that's where our passion should lie, and not to devote ourselves to accumulating more material possessions, recognition, reputation. People work so hard to have a good reputation. It is so meaningless. It's like this, what is it called? 5 minutes of fame, 15 minutes of fame. A good reputation feels like that. You've got a reputation for 5 minutes and you need to constantly kind of actualize it. I mean, update it, because otherwise people forget about you. It's such a useless. And then, you die, and anyway, no one knows you were this incredible person. Like, let's say you find a cure to cancer, and then you die, and you're born as, I don't know, Yael of some other place, and no one knows you found a cure to cancer, right? So you have all this great reputation, but the reputation is gone. No one knows that. You don't even know you did this. So, of course, it's important you found a cure to cancer, and the positive, the virtue that comes along with that. But that's important, not the reputation. All right. Anyway, striving. It's important to strive to purify negative karma, accumulate merit, and so forth, and not for some kind of worldly attainments, to make, I don't know, to have a career and get more money than before than you can ever spend. So meaningless, so empty. I mean, you may feel like, oh, once I get this, I'll be really happy. But no way. It's just drinking salty water and hoping to no longer feel thirsty. They're like, no way. It won't end. There'll be continuous new striving. And of course, instead of rejoicing in the wholesome actions of someone who engages in positive actions, if we rejoice in harmful actions, that's also very important. Someone killed someone we don't like. Ooh, very important not to rejoice. Very important, right? I talked about this with Leora Kennett before. If we have a sense, oh, this other person who now died, now, if out of compassion, okay, so they engage in a lot of negativity, let's say a serial killer is being killed. Well, in a way, it's good for them that they can no longer, it's good for society, it's good for that person that now they've been stopped. In that way, we can say, well, of course, no one deserves to die prematurely and so forth, but at least they can no longer harm themselves and others. So in that sense, that's a kind of, it's okay. And joy in this moment in a limited way, I think is appropriate, but not like, yeah, they're gone, how wonderful. So very dangerous. Anyway, that kind of rejoicing. So these are 6 mistaken forms of practice, and we should be aware of them. We should be aware. We should be careful not to engage in them. And then the text tells us, don't be sporadic. Okay, when it comes to Dharma practice, don't be a hobby Dharma practitioner, right? What is a hobby? I've got some free time just now. It works. I'm not busy. Oh, I can do a little bit of Dharma practice. That's like a hobby Dharma practitioner, right? It should be like in every situation, the Dharma should be there. We should be happy, and of course in a balanced way, and not in a way, I forget who mentioned, I think it was Shmuel who talked about this, like, oh, it's stressful to always watch my own mind. Well, then take a break. It's important to keep calm. It shouldn't stress us out. It should be calm. There should be a sense of joy. And when that's gone, of course, we need to balance it and maybe take a break and, I don't know, just watch a movie or read a good book. That's totally fine. However, if we're in that balanced state, then it shouldn't just be a hobby, but we should apply it at all times. So not to be sporadic. It should be something that we consistently engage in. And not just that, we should train with decisiveness. So without hesitating, emphatically, with our entire being. I mean, if we understand how beneficial this is, and of course, this kind of joy and this kind of decisiveness only arises when we recognize the benefits of our Dharma practice, of reducing our afflictions. What is Dharma practice? It's basically reducing our afflictions. We are slaves of our own afflictions. They hold us captured. They create so much unhappiness the moment they arise. Peace of mind is gone. And then they make us do things that are sometimes mad. They're like over the top. They're crazy. Destroy our relationship with other people, give us trouble right here and right now, cause trouble right here and now, and for the future. I mean, in terms of what goes around comes around, our karma again. I mean, there's nothing good about them. They're not based in reality, as we've seen, the extreme there's nothing good about them. And so if Dharma practice really just refers to reducing them and eventually overcoming them, I mean, how can that not be meaningful? How can we hesitate to engage in that? It's for our own benefit. Nothing else can benefit us more. So to be decisive about it, therefore. And then it goes on to say, be released through the two. So be released in the sense of applying these two, investigation and close analysis, to then help us to find freedom, basically, be released through the two. This is emphasizing the need for reflection. Reflection, which can be described as investigation and close analysis. So investigation is kind of a coarser type of investigation. Close analysis is looking even closer. So this is how those two are usually explained. So like a coarse investigation and a closer analysis. And there are plenty of examples. Take the afflictions, of course. Getting to know them, analyzing them. What is my strongest affliction? What is the one that causes me the greatest trouble? Oh, of course, most of us would probably say attachment, but attachment towards whom? Towards what? Again, of course, there are differences. How does it arise? How long does it remain? How does it influence me? All this is part of our investigation, of our close analysis. And again, here, not with the sense of I need to do this because Geshe Kelsang and his homeless, they all tell me it's important, so I better do it. No, it's important, of course, to do it with joy, with a sense of this is important, this is meaningful. And then it actually and so also a sense of curiosity. So this is meaningful, this is important, but also how interesting to learn about my own mind. I mean, we know so much about the ocean, we know so much about, I don't know, the plants and everything, but we don't know so little about our own mind. We learn about these concepts, these ideas, or these subjects in school, but we don't learn really much about our own mind. And the best way, of course, to learn about our own mind is to observe our own mind, learn through observation. And here, part of that observation is also investigation and close analysis. So how does inherent existence, this clinging to inherent existence, grasping at inherent existence, how does that give rise to self-centeredness, etc.? So in that way, there's a lot to investigate and to closely analyze. And then, if we can do all this, we may feel really full of ourselves. We may feel, whoa, I've done, I've really achieved something. But do not boast of your good deeds. Because it's like, this is like, why do we need to say that? Because our self-centered mind is so cheeky. It always finds a way in, right? You've just been really, I don't know, emphatic. You've been really decisive about your Dharma practice. It's going really, really well. Compassion for others, etc. And before long, because we're so used to self-centeredness and we're so used to, so we reinforce it all the time, it'll pop up. It'll kind of come in. Oh, I'm so great. I'm a little bit better than everyone. Look at them. They're not real Dharma practitioner. I'm the real deal. I mean, these thoughts, they creep in. And if we don't watch out, we reinforce them. If we just allow for them to run wild, we strengthen the habit of these thoughts. We strengthen this type of self-centeredness that manifests itself by focusing on our Dharma practice. And again, we destroy everything we may feel now we want to boast about. We basically destroy it. So do not boast of your good deeds. Being kind to others, how long we've practiced the Dharma, how learned, how disciplined we are, how much we've meditated. I mean, we do this. We like to do this. And of course, because I feel like, especially when we deal with the self a lot and that the self doesn't exist, I'm sure there are moments when we suppress ourself and it comes out stronger. But again, we need to work with that and be aware when we are suppressing our own self-centeredness, and therefore, yeah, watch out and not be tempted by boasting about what we've done. So this boasting is really important. To not do it. I mean, of course, we can talk about what we've done. We can talk about it, but without this sense of arrogance. Okay. Do not be ill-tempered. Also important. So one is to do with arrogance. There's boasting of our own good deeds. And then ill-tempered, of course, being ill-tempered, being angry, being annoyed and so forth. That has to do, yeah, with anger, with aversion. Because, well, Dharma practice, when we practice the Dharma, sorry, here it is. When we practice the Dharma, we'll have obstacles. There'll be good and bad. I mean, there'll be good times when our Dharma practice runs smoothly. And so, of course, at that time, we're not supposed to be boasting, we'll not be arrogant about it. But then there are times when things go wrong. So not to be ill-tempered. And of course, especially when we may work for the benefit of other sentient beings, we're kind to others, and they repay our kindness with insult. Ooh, very difficult. Now, do not be ill-tempered. It sounds a bit like, I've mentioned that example before. Don't sweat. Don't feel cold. I mean, it's like, how can you say that? It's an automatic response. Well, there are two sides to that. An automatic response, yes, it's true. Sometimes it just naturally arises, but it's then in our own hand to allow for it to just run wild or to apply the antidote. That's our own decision. And then with regard to well, not even allowing it for it to rise, if we now, so even first of all, yeah, so as I just said, allow, even if it arises naturally, we can stop it. But we can also learn for anger not to arise as spontaneously as it does right now, as it might do right now. So, for instance, to know certain situations make me angry, certain situations lead to aversion, aggression, and so forth, and kind of be prepared. And it's almost like the object, it's very hard to put it into words, but there is a bit of a distance between the object that makes me angry, or that feeling, that reaction, and my own mind. It's kind of like I've got time to react. Yeah, I've created a distance, a healthy distance, that if they say something, I take a deep breath. I don't take it personally. I don't allow for it to get too close to my self-centeredness. I mean, I don't know how to put it into words, but there's a sense of distance so that I don't react right away. And then we can really learn that. We can learn that to not right away react. And if we don't react right away, we're much less likely to become angry, to become aggressive, and so forth, ill-tempered. So again, something we need to learn. And especially in the context of our Dharma practice, when things go wrong, when it's stressful, when it's difficult, anger may arise. Then do not be fickle. Now, fickle has two aspects, being fickle. It can mean being fickle, not being fickle in our day-to-day life. So not even in the context of the Dharma, but being one moment being really cheerful, and then the next moment totally depressed at the slightest provocation, but the slightest problem or the slightest issue. So this kind of emotional, being like an emotional yo-yo. This is also part of our practice, and it's actually possible to learn to become more stable, to become more level-headed. Very much one way to bring this about is to be aware of impermanence. What is it that throws us from being very cheerful to being upset and so forth? Well, something that suddenly occurs, an event, a situation we don't like. And oftentimes we have no sense of the impermanence of that situation because something happens and we're so upset. And there's a sense this negative situation is here to stay. And we get terribly depressed. But the moment that negative situation occurred, it's already changing into something else if you observe it. Or to become really excited when something wonderful happens. We're like so excited, jumping around. But in that moment when that positive situation occurred, it's already changing. It's already on its way out. So this kind of holding on to it as lasting and being either overexcited or overly depressed over it, well, that's just not based, those reactions are not based on reality. And it's important to focus on the impermanence of each situation. Yes, to rejoice for a moment, but then let it go. Oh, nice. Okay, let it go. Someone just, I don't know, praised me, or I don't know, said something wonderful that millions of people are going to read. Okay, but okay, let it go. It's already changing on the way out. So therefore, to not be fickle, but to find that kind of inner balance that no matter what, we remain even, level-headed. But of course, it's also important in terms of our Dharma practice. So not only in our interaction with other people, because it's very confusing. And I'm sure we all have examples of people who one day like this and the next day like that. It's very difficult. I can think of one person, this person living in close proximity, being part of my daily encounter. This person, one moment, this person is really happy and relaxed, and the next person really upset about things. So it's very confusing. I always have to I've tried to adjust to this person's kind of mood. Which one is it? And I find myself avoiding them. It's tiring at times. I don't know which one is it going to be. And so I'm pretty sure I'm like that as well. I'm just not aware of it. So it's exhausting for others if one day I'm like this and the next day. So to not be fickle in that way. And this erratic changeability, of course, is really difficult for our Dharma practice. So not just in terms of our ordinary worldly social relationships with others, but in terms of our Dharma practice, very important not to be fickle. And then not to be boisterous. So it's boisterous. So it's kind of very similar to not boasting about our good deeds, but it's more about the mental attitude of not expecting. So it's not about showing off in front of others, wanting others to know, but it's more about expecting from others thanks, or I don't know, fame, being renowned because of benefiting others and for practicing the Dharma. Okay, so that's the last of those 22 precepts, basically. I don't know about the order. I don't know why they were spoken in that way. I could imagine that Geshe Kelsang, he taught, of course, this text. Possibly he taught it orally and it was written down. He taught it to different disciples, certain disciples, and in that order, he felt it was both beneficial for their mind. And it's interesting because there's so many different versions of this text, and sometimes the order of these precepts, although the order of the 7 points is the same, but these subpoints are sometimes presented in a different order. Sometimes they're in some texts, some of the points are not there, others are there instead. So there are different versions, and possibly because Geshe Kelsang taught the different versions to different disciples. Anyway, let me just do the last bit, read the last bit here. So the conclusion. To conclude, there is a verse of confidence regarding the mind of enlightenment. So verse of confidence in the sense of, well, yeah, it's been difficult, it's been hard, but I have no regrets. So because of my numerous aspirations, here, Dharma aspirations, we can assume, I have defied the tragic tale of suffering and have taken instructions to subdue self-grasping. Now, even if death comes, I have no regrets. Okay, so basically, yes, it was hard, it was difficult, but I've been able to overcome suffering in a certain way. My life has become happier and so forth. I've taken instructions to subdue my self-grasping, and now I have no regret. What a wonderful situation. I mean, if we can actually die feeling no regrets, give my best. So really no regrets. That is possible if we practice in accordance with the 7-point mind training. And then we've got the colophon, which is actually by Pabongka Rinpoche, because as you remember, this version of the text, it was edited by Pabongka Rinpoche. So he just explains a little bit about this text. So in the literature of the older New Kadampa traditions, there are many versions of the root text. And New Kadampa here does not mean New Kadampa as we've heard it from the organizations practicing Shukden, but it's rather the time of Pabongka Rinpoche, like the older traditions and the newer ones. There are many versions of the root text and commentaries on the 7-point mind training. We've just heard many different root texts and, of course, different commentaries. The order of the passages and the number of the words in them vary greatly. Some of them cannot be confidently included in the various outlines when explaining the text. That's how Pabongka Rinpoche, that's his opinion. And there are other lines that are not commonly known to be part of the root text. So maybe they were added later. There's possibly some disagreement on which lines were part of Geshe Chekowa's original teachings and which ones were added by someone else. For these reasons, I, Pabongka Rinpoche, have long considered creating an authoritative root text by combining, what did I say, collating, okay, anyway, by combining or collating the versions found in the texts. Mind training like the rays of the sun, ornament of Lobsang's thoughts, and the essential nectar, because they're all based on the 7-point mind training. So taking these texts as they have the instructions as found in these mind training texts, mind training like the rays of the sun, ornament of Lobsang's thoughts, and so forth, Pabongka Rinpoche constructed this particular version, feeling that this was reliable, that this reflected Geshe Chekowa's thoughts or intent. When I was teaching the stages of the path to enlightenment, we all know that he did. Pabongka Rinpoche taught liberation in the palm of your hand. At Geden Chambaling, Chamba, in the year of the woodpig, Genden Chambaling, Chamba, in the year of the woodpig, Lamrimpa Punsopanden, so someone who practices the Lamrim a lot is called Lamrimpa usually, like, yeah, Lamrimpa, it's kind of like someone who's sincere in their practice or is good in their Lamrim practice. So this Lamrimpa Punsopanden, a tireless practitioner, this was in 1935, presented me with a kata, or an auspicious scarf, an offering, and asked me to produce such a compilation. So after carefully researching many root texts and their commentaries, I compiled this root text and supplemented it with outlines. May goodness and virtue increase. Okay, that's that. So we finished the text. I'm sorry I didn't do the Lamrim today. Of course, once we start the Precious Garland, we'll go back to the Lamrim. Depending on who's attending, I may start from the beginning, but of course this text takes much longer than this text, so we definitely go past the perfection of patience. And anyway, we only got to the perfection of patience, but of course you could continue from there, read the Lamrim, read the commentaries on the Lamrim. It's really not difficult. So if you want to continue your practice, and if it's just 5 minutes every day of Lamrim practice, that is said to be so extremely beneficial. And of course, everything you've learned should be relayed back to the Lamrim, if you can do that. Now, at the very end, we didn't have an extensive generation of the right, I mean, our motivation. We didn't spend much time on that, but might as well do meditation on what we've learned today, at least with regard to the text. So let's do that. 15 minutes. I'll be a little bit, I won't be able to finish completely in time, but I hope it's okay. It's just a few minutes that I'll be going beyond the usual time. All right, so let's start with breathing meditation, and then I'll guide you through the different points. So Geshe Kelsang instructs us to engage in the principal practices right now, which basically means to understand what's more important than worldly affairs is the Dharma. And of studying and teaching the Dharma, most important is practicing it. The most important practices being practice of Bodhicitta and emptiness. And then most important is to practice based on the instruction by a realized master. Also, it's important to not apply misplaced understanding, which is the 15th precept. So instead of being patient with our Dharma practice, if we endure worldly difficulties, well, that is misguided patience or forbearance. And savoring a taste of sensual desire instead of enjoying to study, reflect on, and meditate on the Dharma is misguided enjoyment. Having compassion for those who practice the Dharma instead of having compassion for those who commit negative actions is misguided compassion. Devoting ourselves to accumulating material possessions fame, so forth, instead of devoting ourselves to the Dharma, is misguided passion. Striving for worldly attainments instead of striving to purify negativities and accumulate merit is misguided striving. And instead of rejoicing in others' wholesome actions, we rejoice in their harmful actions. Is misguided rejoicing. Geshe Kelsang also tells us not to be sporadic, not to practice the Dharma as a mere hobby. Number 17, he says that we should train with decisiveness. So to practice mind training without hesitation, to devote ourselves to this emphatically. In a determined way. Number 18, we should be released through the two, investigation and close analysis. So to utilize these tools of our mind, investigation and close analysis, to examine our own mind, our afflictions, how they arise from self-grasping and self-centeredness. What they perceive, to what actions they lead, and how we can reduce them and possibly abandon them. Number 19, do not boast of your good deeds. So to not show off. When it comes to our Dharma practice, to not boast about how learned or disciplined we are, how much we meditate, or cherish others. Number 20. Do not be ill-tempered. So do not retaliate, even if others humiliate us in front of others. Even if they insult us. Use us. Or root to keep our calm. And practice patience. Point 21. Do not be fickle. So we shouldn't change from being cheery and happy to being deeply depressed at the slightest provocation. We shouldn't be like an emotional yo-yo, up and down and down and up. To not react erratic and changeable, but remain level-headed based on our understanding of impermanence. That any good or bad situation comes and goes and constantly changes. And then 22, do not be boisterous, which basically means not to expect any gratefulness, fame, and renown. Practicing mind training. For cherishing and benefiting others. And so now, in conclusion, spend a few moments to single-pointedly focus on whatever insight, whatever conclusion you've come to through your analysis. And allow for it to sink deeper into your mind, to affect you on a subtler level. And then let's dedicate whatever virtue we've accumulated, not just today, but throughout the entire course, studying, reflecting, and meditating on the 7-point mind training. May become, most importantly, become a cause for our own enlightenment. May it cause us to generate bodhicitta, realize emptiness, and eventually overcome all our obstructions and become fully enlightened for the benefit of all sentient beings. And not just that, may it also cause our great spiritual masters or embodiment of the Dharma, like His Holiness the Dalai Lama, to have a long and healthy life, so that they may continue to guide us with their words and their examples. And may our virtue affect everyone else in a positive way. May it affect these meaningless and cruel conflicts going on everywhere in the world, so that they'll be reduced and eventually cease. May it help people to understand what we all have in common, that we're all dependent on each other, and based on that, help them to develop more love, compassion for each other. And so with this in mind, if someone can do the dedication prayers in English, someone read them or recite them in English. Vada, maybe? Oh, there we are. Good, very good. Due to the merits of these virtuous actions, may I quickly attain the state of a Guru Buddha and lead all living beings without exception into that enlightened state. May the supreme jewel Bodhicitta that has not arisen arise and grow, and may that which has arisen not diminish, but increase more and more. In a land encircled by snow mountains, you are the source of all happiness and good. All-powerful Chenrezig, Tenzin Gyatso, please remain until samsara ends. Okay, thank you very much. I'm sorry for that, the problem we had in the beginning, the technical issues. Anyway, it was lovely to complete the text today. And thank you for participating. I look forward to continuing with a different text. So in the meantime, please be well, be safe, and I hope to see you very soon.
Thank you very much.
And thank you, of course,
dear
to everyone else, to Dalit, of course, who's been amazing, looking after everything technically, etc. Edward, who, of course, stepped in, Orit today, who was very helpful with managing everything, and everyone else, your questions, your interests, everything. So thank you very much for that. And take care. Okay. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Geshe Ma.
Thank you, Geshe Ma. Thank you.
Thank